So again, I might have introduced myself, but let me do it again. Again, my name is Almitra Gasper. I am the Strong Messenger Project Coordinator for the Cure Violence sites in New York City. So what that means is that in New York City, we have just about 30 sites. I mean, I really can't keep up at this point. I know we're in about 30 different neighborhoods and maybe 27 sites. Where credible messengers have band together to do something about the rate and the amount of gun violence that we are experiencing in New York City. That initiative has been here for, let me see. Oh, who is that? Can you mute your phone? That might be a little more than the rest of us can deal with right now. So if you're not speaking right now, if you can mute, that would be great. And I'm actually going to pause this for a second so I can turn the music off. There we go. So in New York City, like I was saying, we have teams of credible messengers that are doing what they can to reduce the amount of shootings that are happening in some of our neighborhoods. They do this by interrupting violence, and usually what that means is mediating conflict, right? Helping persons to discover other ways of resolving their conflicts other than shooting each other. And so that work can be stressful and or triggering. And so what I am responsible for is coordinating the therapeutic services. So making sure that there is another person that's not on the team that becomes like this proxy, like ancillary part of the team that's just concerned with the team's well-being and how they are handling what it is that they are experiencing in their work. And I just got to say, that it is awesome, right? It helps with team cohesion, and it has helped to break whatever stigma there has been around talk therapy, because people are now teams of credible messengers at one point was like, no, we don't want that. Who is this person? I don't need to talk to nobody. I'm not crazy. That was the initial response 6 or 7, 10, 8 years ago. And now they're like, yeah, when we have our session, that really helps me process my stuff and really gets me to know what I'm doing and work better with my team. Okay, so that's the work that I do, and which says something about me. I am passionate about this work. Today's conversation is on understanding violence as a public health issue. I work at the Department of Health. That's where I sit and do the work that I do for our credible messengers. So that's a great place to sit. But public health, you can sit anywhere and be concerned and be actively working on the health of everyone, right? The health of everyone in your family, the health of everyone in your neighborhood. So let's get into it. So I also have my co-facilitator who's only going to be with me for the first hour, Ms. Claudia Charles. Say hello, Claudia. You're out there. Just want to make sure that your mic is working.
Hello, guys.
Okay, excellent. So Claudia is with me. Claudia is the intern that came on to work with us during the spring semester. She is graduating from Hunter College. In their public health programming, and probably has plans to go on and do other schooling, but certainly is very interested in community health, and has been really excited about this current work that she's been doing with me around violence prevention. And so she's here, and you will hear her voice throughout this first hour. So this curriculum was developed by the persons that are listed here on the screen. I'm not going to list all their names. What I am going to do is, Claudia, can you drop the links that are on the screen here in the chat? This training is open source. So what does that mean? That means I was looking for a training because the place where I work doesn't have one, and I found this. And they said, yeah, we put it out there so that people can use it. And so I'm going to share it with you, share all the resources that I found when I was looking for this training with you. I repackaged it, redesigned it. This training is designed to be a 2-day, full-day in-person training. What we are doing is a two-hour and then another 2-hour session on Monday, and we are virtual. So this will be different. This is a condensed version. I, unfortunately, will be doing a lot of talking, and we will be engaging and we'll be hearing from others. This topic does take some study if you really want to get into it, and so there will be plenty of resources that we will make available for those that wanted to study more. But the persons that designed this particular training have designed it very specifically for community health workers and for credible messengers. And so, it was perfect, because that's exactly who it is that I work with. And so let's get started. Give you some idea of how we are doing this. Again, if you are not speaking right now, if you could mute your phone, that would be great to reduce the amount of the background noise and the bandwidth devoted to background noise. So what are the objectives for the day? So by the end of this session, right, in the next 90 minutes or so, what it is that I'm hoping that you will have a definition of the approach, the public health approach to violence prevention. Be able to describe at least 3, maybe 2 types of violence. Be able to identify the differences maybe between institutional and interpersonal violence. Be able to call out what a social determinant of health is, and self-care, right? So if you know me, there's no session that I do where we don't talk about how you take care of yourself. So this is what we are up to for the day. So some guidelines to help us get through the session. So we are on video conference. We've been this way kind of as a rule now for 2 years. And so what works best is when you're not speaking for you to keep your mic muted. Sometimes it feels like, oh no, I'm about to speak, right? So when you are about to speak, unmute your mic. This is technical. The bandwidth that's required to collect the information that's happening in your background noise takes away from whoever is speaking or takes away from what's on the screen. And so it's just a way to manage the technology. The chat is super available, right? For any questions, comments, conversations. I know that people get frustrated when there's a side conversation going on in the chat and this person presenting. And many of us are multitaskers. I'm here for all of it. So use the chat. Share the airtime. There are some of us that are really, really great when it comes to these forums at speaking up, speaking out, and saying what needs to be said. And so just be mindful if you're a person that likes to hog the airtime, if you're that person, that you should. You take the time to just share the airtime. Hey, Giovanni Guerrero. Pardon me if I mispronounced your last name, but could you mute your mic for me?
Yeah, that's how you spell it.
Okay, could you mute it though? Your mic? Could you mute your mic? Thank you. All right. So confidentiality. So these sessions tend to cause people to want to share. That stuff is not tea, y'all. Don't go gossiping about what you hear. Just whatever it is that is really intimate about people sharing, just appreciate it and share the lesson if you must share what you heard. This is a brave space. All right, we don't talk about some heavy things. So this is to contend with the problems, not individuals. So it's not about people. This is about the issues. Let's be impeccable with our words. I get that straight from the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. It just, in the basic sense, it means speak the truth and be kind, right? The truth ain't gotta hurt. Resist the urge to make assumptions and or draw quick conclusions. Just simply be curious, ask questions. And when you are speaking, this is for you. I mean, it helps all of us when we hear it. Speak powerfully from the I, right? This is your chance to identify with what you think, you feel, what you are hearing, and share that, right? In other words, try to avoid generalizations such as, well, when you blah, 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 or most people, we talk like that all the time. And I'm just encouraging us in this space to get more specific and really do the work that's required here. Okay, so I said a lot. I said I was going to be talking a lot. Are there any questions about what I've just said with things that are on this screen and or things you might want to add to make sure that this session is enjoyable for the 30 participants that are here today? All right. Silence is consent. I will take that. Thank you, Claudia, for dropping those links in the chat. Again, links to the resources and to the facilitator's guide and all of that for this training are in the chat, and we will drop them again if we have to. We will also email them to everyone that is present. Okay, so if there are no questions, let's get on. Let's move it on. Okay, so the agenda for today, we're about to do some introductions and split everyone up into breakout rooms to do some introductions. We just reviewed our agreements, and thank you for allowing me to set the agreements. Usually we would create those together, so thank you. We're going to start out with defining violence, right? And then getting into an understanding about our public health approach. And then take a break and start a conversation about social determinants of health towards the end, and always end off with things that we can do to make sure that we are well, taking care of ourselves. Okay, so let's start with the breakout groups. So we're going to break out into groups of maybe 2 to 3 people. When you get into your breakout group, please first introduce yourself, right? So this is an opportunity for us to do personal introductions. If you haven't already introduced yourself to everybody in the room, please do that in the chat right now. We're gonna go into breakout rooms for roughly about 6 minutes. When you get into your breakout room with your partner or your triad, please take a moment to introduce yourself and then discuss this question right here: what is violence? So what we're going to do is you're going to spend a moment seeing how it is that the 2 or 3 of you define violence. What might be your definition of violence if you had to define it? You could Google it, or you could just make it up. I'm pretty sure everyone has their own ideas about what this is. This is really important. So are there any questions about the activity before we start to break you up? Okay. All right. So let me just see how many of us. There's 29 of us. That's what it says. All righty. About, here we go, 10 rooms. And I will see you on the other side. Okay, great. Remember, introductions, introduce yourself to the persons in your breakout room, and then have a discussion on what is violence. What you're working on is a definition. And we'll be right back. Our room's now open. Hey, Charisma? All right. I don't know what this is. Who this came from? Fight Across. Is there 4 minutes? Hey, sir. Julio. Now he's in room 1. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Alrighty. Welcome back. How's everybody doing? How was that? It's okay. Get the conversation going, meet some new people maybe. So we're still waiting on everyone to come back. So for those of you that just joined and might have missed like what just happened, we were introducing ourselves to each other in breakout rooms and starting to open up the conversation on, or today's conversation on understanding violence as a public health issue by just having a brief discussion on how we define violence. Okay, and so let's hear from one, maybe 2 persons on what you came up with in your conversation. Anyone that wants to join, chime in, get your voice in the space.
Can I say something?
Yes, you can, whoever that is, yes, and then Andrew next.
My name is Damaris Negron. I am a hospital representative for Save and Goso in East Harlem. My partner was Connie. She's from Staten Island. Our definition of violence is pretty much a behavior involving physical force. It tends to hurt people, which is one of the causes of gun violence and stuff, of the disease. And we also was talking about what things would influence violence, pretty much the neighborhoods, people's backgrounds. So we was talking in depth about what are factors that influence violence.
Excellent. Okay, Damaris and Connie, thank you for the overachiever behavior. Excellent. I love it. Okay, one other person, what did you discuss or what came about in your conversation? If somebody had their hands up, is it Andrew?
I worked with Claudia and Charita, and basically we came up with the definition of violence that involved any transgression that kind of trespasses against another person. So as long as it harms someone else, that's kind of a form of violence. It could be physical, mental, emotional, or verbal.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so let's see what it is I have here in the slide. Claudia, you out there, can you read this for us? Our definition, working definition that we'll be working with this morning.
All right, so we said that violence has traditionally been conceptualized as self-directed or interpersonal physical force used to hurt, damage, or kill, often using guns, knives, and other weapons or one's own names.
Yeah. Okay. So this is pretty much what I heard you all say. Self-directed or interpersonal, physical force, weapons, including your hands or your legs or whatever. This is really what it is that we might think about when we are in this conversation about violence and violent behavior and what it is that we're dealing with. So this is good. This is a typical, pretty conventional, traditional understanding of violence. So let's get into the public health approach. So Claudia, can you give this to me, read this for us?
Sure, of course. So public health shows that there is no single explanation for the continued problem of violence.
Okay, and so what we're doing now is through the lens of public health, we're opening this up. Public health really always wants to know what's the root cause so that it can get rid of it, right? Because it's looking to eradicate the issue. Violence is complicated. And so there's just no single explanation for the continued problem of violence. Okay, so let me hear from someone else who we haven't heard from yet. You get your voice in the space if you can read this slide for us. Anybody?
My name is Jalil.
I'm sorry.
My name is Jalil. Considers the
Hey,
aspect.
Jalil.
How you doing? Considers the aspects of violence that are not the responsibility of the justice system or law enforcement.
Okay, excellent. AK, we're gonna get you in there. Don't worry. Exactly, right? And so public health has a range, right? So public health is like, listen, there's no single explanation.
Credible messages.
Credible messages. Hey, woo. Mute. We need you to mute your phone.
Mute it.
Got me on echo. Oh boy. Okay, so the public health approach considers the aspects of violence that is not the responsibility of the justice system or law enforcement. And this is no shade, right, to law enforcement. I'm clear about who my audience is. This is no shade to law enforcement. This is about the overwhelming amount of weight that gets put on law enforcement to deal with the aspects of violence that law enforcement really is not designed to deal with, right? And so let's compare this a little bit more so that we have a deeper understanding, right? And so sometimes we need to know what it's not, right? And so the public health approach is different when we compare it to the law enforcement approach and or remedies in the situation, right? And so, Claudia, you can do this with me. You do the public health approach, right? So law enforcement tends to be more about retribution.
So public health tends to be more about restorative.
Yes. And law enforcement really doles out punishment. So it's punitive.
While public health is treatment oriented.
Mm-hmm. So when law enforcement comes across these issues, it's more about making arrests, detaining people and making arrests.
While public health is based on triage and patient intake.
And triage is that thing that they do where they assess the level of severity of the issue. So when you go into the ER, you see the triage nurse. Her job is determining whether or not she puts you in a seat in the waiting room or she puts you in the back with a doctor right away. So that's what triage is. It's just assessing the level of severity. The law enforcement approach is more about systemic or systematic assessments and then sentencing, right? So it's not that they're arbitrary, but they are just more systematic, right? So it's not individual like Claudia.
Public health is based on individual diagnoses and prescriptions.
Law enforcement approach to behavior change usually ends up as a short-term outcome.
Public health is based on behavior change and has more potential to be long-term.
Excellent. And when it comes to law enforcement, those choices or those decisions are based on social norms the political environment, and mores, which is just another way of saying the social norms.
And public health decisions are based on health screening and environmental data.
Okay, so this slide is loaded. Questions, feedback, reflections on what you just heard. Anyone?
I didn't mean to do that, but since I did, do they have any data to kind of tease that out to see which approach has more effectiveness short-termly, long-termly? I know that, if we ask the people who participated in either one, they would definitely choose the public health approach. But I'm just trying to see if from a community standpoint, if we have data that supports that we move more toward this public health model.
Yes, actually, the amount of data is overwhelming, Ms. Walton. And so we have, let me see, Claudia, drop that link in the chat that talks about this, restorative approaches. This is really about, this slide helps us to distinguish like a restorative approach, a restorative type justice approach to a punitive approach. And law enforcement can participate in restorative justice, as many agencies can. So there is actually a lot of data that talks about these approaches and them being more effective long-term. There's a lot of it. Sometimes I think it's too much, and that might be what the issue is, right? We have spent years, at least 30, definitely more though, just studying it and researching it. So now that we have 30 years worth of data and more that says that locking up people doesn't solve any problems, it hasn't reduced any of the issues, right? That restorative approaches and addressing the health of individuals is effective. So now what are we doing with it institutionally, right? And so I want to just point that out, that there's actually a lot of data, and we probably need to get out of the analysis paralysis and get into more implementation and what they call operationalizing this stuff. Any other feedback or questions? No one? Okay, well, thank you, Ms. Walton, for that. So what are the main activities? There are 4. We're going to review each one of them and give some examples very briefly inside of this public health approach. So health promotion prevention, right? So that sounds exactly what they are. They happen as a way to help prevent, and then harm reduction and curative care are what happens after the problem is already started. Okay, and so somebody else, read health promotion for us. What is health promotion?
Hi, this is, okay. Health promotion, the process of enabling people to increase control over and to improve their health. Health promotion attempts to make the healthy choice the easy choice.
Excellent. And the other voice, can you read prevention for us?
Hi, this is Carmen. Prevention, stopping the problem before it starts.
Excellent. The first voice, can you tell me your name?
Oh, Eva.
Eva. It says Zoom user. Eva and Carmen, yes. Thank you. And so health promotion is just really like, how do we make the healthy choice the easy one? So if you have children and you have ever had to feed these children, you have lived this in your own household, right? How do you make the broccoli the easy, right? And probably swaddle it with butter and cheese or something, right? Or just give it to them when they're super young before they develop preferences. Examples of health promotion campaigns. Stop smoking, right? So stop smoking is strong, right? As a campaign, national. It is easier now to say no to being offered a cigarette or do you want to smoke or something like that is a little bit easier to say no to those things. Seatbelts. So I came up in the era when seatbelts, it wasn't illegal, and then they made the law, right? So before it was a law in place, which is also helpful. You got in the car, you didn't put your seatbelt on, big deal, right? There was no big deal. And then someone might tease you for putting your seatbelt on, like it was kind of ridiculous. Now, do you remember that? Some of us remember that. Now you get in the car, it's like, yo, put your seatbelt on. So, Rob, did you want to say something, Rob? Mr. Rob C?
No, I was saying that I can remember when the seatbelt thing wasn't cool to have on.
You remember that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And now it's like, yo, dog, put your seatbelt on, right? And it's for whatever reason, we don't want you to get hurt or we don't want to get pulled over, whatever the reason is, right? And so that's an example of health promotion. Prevention, so water filtration systems is a preventative measure, right? And so these are just public health things that are in place that you probably are not thinking about. But the water has to be cleaned before it gets to our faucet, right? And that is a prevention measure, a public health prevention measure. So those are my examples. Any other examples, persons like thinking about things, you're wondering, is this prevention, is this health promotion, things that you've seen?
Well, I think just the current climate as far as COVID, that at the beginning of COVID, you had to wear a mask whenever you entered like a public establishment.
And so there was that, and that's a preventative measure. The other guidance that was given by all the health departments all over the country about washing your hands, right? Wearing a mask, making sure there's a certain amount of physical distance between you and someone else that might be contagious. So there's all kinds of ways that you have experienced this recently and then over the course of your life. And then there are the other two activities. So let's see if we can get two more voices for harm reduction and curative care. Marcy? Miss Marcy Walton. Did you want to read one?
Sure, I don't have my glasses on, but I will make a great attempt.
Oh!
Harm reduction, reducing the harm caused by a problem. The problem does not go away. Curative care, solving a problem after it already exists. This is a good one for me.
Yeah.
That's a good slide for me. Yes, I work in HIV and STD prevention. So I work from a harm reduction, risk reduction standpoint all day. Encouraging people to have better sex behaviors, doing behavior modifications, lowering the number of partners, types of sex they have, with drugs, without drugs, just having all those conversations to try to give them harm reduction, and then doing the test, and then they come back positive, not listening to none of the harm reduction strategies. And then we have to do the curative care.
Yes, ma'am. You are the perfect person to read it. Absolutely. So harm reduction is, we might have heard it before. It applies in so many ways. And so what Marcy just talked about is the way that the industry kind of thinks about it the most. They think about it more about substance abuse and more about STDs, harm reduction. But what we do with gun violence and our risk reduction approaches is the same thing, right? And so there's a level of harm that's already happened, and there's probably some more behavior that's going to happen that is harmful. What we are looking to do is reduce the risk, right, and reduce the amount of harm, right? And so it's not easy, especially when we start getting to the legal stuff, right? So we don't say don't carry the gun. We can't really say don't carry a gun, right? We can't really say that. We really just cannot say that, right? That doesn't serve the issue. What we can do is talk about the problems with that gun and encourage more intelligence around the use of it. Like, we can talk to people about what the issues are, but ultimately people are going to make their own choices. So I appreciate harm reduction because it attempts to wrangle with the whole person and allow persons to have dignity in how it is they choose to deal with whatever particular issue that they are dealing with. Curative care is just exactly what it sounds like: getting a cure, taking medicine, bed rest. Like, there's all kinds of ways that curative care happens that we experience on a regular basis. Any other examples of these two aspects, harm reduction and or curative care? Anyone else have an idea, example?
Well, I kind of wanted to say something, because when I'm thinking about this, and then and then you showed that slide regarding public health, restorative, and law enforcement. If they would implement all of these restorative practices, there wouldn't be so many people who are incarcerated. But they don't implement the restorative practices where they should implement them. So that's what I think of when I look at this. They wait until, like, there's a problem that already exists, right? Because they're not dealing with any mental health. They're not dealing with, right, poverty. They're not dealing with racism. They're not dealing with any of that. And so if they use those restorative practices, then we wouldn't have so many Black and brown people in prison. But I think I over.
You're doing very well, Eva. Because you're just it's a prelude into what we are here to talk about. Excellent, excellent, excellent. And so with that, let's get into this public health approach. We will take a break in a little while, so just so you know. But let's look at this really quickly. And so now we're going to say, all right, so then in public health, then how do we, like, deal with this, wrangle with this problem, right? So first we have to define it, then identify, and then develop and scale. So in this training, we're going to deal with these first two: define and identify. Develop and scale, more than likely we might already be in some sort of program, work in some sort of model, and that we're scaling at the community level or neighborhood level, and then, you know, hopefully larger. And so we're going to have a discussion about the entire thing, but mostly we're going to focus on define and identify. And as this is in the public health, this is called DDs, but it's just the approach. And honestly, I think it's the approach that many of us probably take in our life when we are dealing with problems. And so the first thing that we must do is define the problem. And so, Marcia, you had asked about data, and I'm telling you that we got too much data, right? We have collected so much data about what is going on here, and we have it now. And so this opportunity in this workshop is for us to talk about some of that information and then to figure out how we're going to apply it in our spheres of influence where we are. So after defining the problem, we must identify the root causes. Again, public health is all about what's the root cause, because if we can get that, then we can eradicate the problem. So identify root causes, and then the risk and protective factors. In this particular instance, we're talking about violence, and then research possible interventions. So this work has been done by public health departments all over the country, including the big one, which is the CDC, including the World Health Organization. We're going to hear from them in a moment. So the other two aspects of this is to develop and test strategies, and then scale up and then scale across. So basically what this means is that after you have figured out what the issue is and identified what is causing this issue, and identify what it is that you can do to prevent this issue from coming up again, and to deal with the harm that is already caused, develop some sort of strategy, test it. Once it's working, apply it here and everywhere. That's just it, right? This is the basics of the approach. So before we move on into what the World Health Organization how they define violence. I just want to collect any questions and or comments about these two slides here in this approach. Anything not landing? Okay, y'all still with me? Because it's about to get good. All right. So, Eva, where you at? Are you available? You might be
Yes.
working and have other things going on around you, but could you read this slide for us?
Sure. The World Health Organization defines violence as the intentional use of physical force or power, threatened or actual, against oneself, another person, or against a group of community, which either results or has a high likelihood of resulting in injury, death, psychological harm, and maldevelopment or deprivation.
Ooh, that's a lot. Thank you. I want one other person to read it too. Let me see if I can get a brother. What about you, Rob? Can you read that for me?
The World Health Organization, WHO, defines violence as an international use of physical force or power, threatened or actual against oneself, another person, or against a group or community, which either results or has a high likelihood of resulting in injury, death, physiological harm, maldevelopment, and deprivation.
Thank you both, because that's a lot of words. And I just really need it read twice so that everyone can hear it and it can land. And so here we have this broader definition that the World Health Organization has formed. Claudia, if you could drop that link in the chat so the person can get access to that link and that information and that data. So reflections, before I talk about this, what do you see here or want to reflect on?
Can I say something?
Oh. Yeah.
Okay. This one says intentional. I didn't see that before. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't see intentional use. Also, the group and community was more added than the other definition.
Yeah. Thank you, Elsie.
I like that it uses, I like the word intent to describe, because again, in the field that I work in, one of the issues around people infecting people with HIV purposely was their intent. And then the other thing I liked was it said, wait, what was the word? Not intent, it was threatened against oneself. I'm sorry.
It says threatened or actual.
Yeah, that's what I like, threatened or actual. So if you threaten it, it's still violent. If people have the reaction as if it was fear and they fear for their life and they have a heart attack, that is that violent, so it is the threat of exists. So I like that they made that inclusive of this.
Yeah. So what is standing out so far is intentional, threatened or actual. Anything else? You can hear from one, maybe two other persons if you have a reflection on this definition.
Yeah, I'd like to say something. Yeah, I've been in the field almost 20 years and I still see the same things going on. Really no change depending, it doesn't matter who's in office, it's still overcrowded schools in poor areas, violence, gun violence. I don't see this happening in, upper class neighborhoods that there's an amount of gun violence. So the guns come to the poor areas still. The trainings haven't changed. It's still the same. It's still the same thing. I'm talking about since 1980, or 1990, I've been going to training. It's still the same topic, gun violence. And I think it really starts in schools, because if you're going to overcrowded school and it's hot and you're leaving a home that's probably violent also, and you come to a class and there's more violence there too. So there's no real change. So what do? You go to the street.
Right.
You know, it's just the system is built to just continue and continue and continue on. And it's, you know, I just see like it's like being in the same training again. It just never changes. It's just the same. We're talking about the same thing over and over again with no change. And I'm thinking in 20 years, we're still going to be talking about the same thing.
I think the difference, and I was in the 80s too, in law enforcement in the 80s, by the way. And I've been on both sides of that coin. I've been, you know, in law enforcement. I've also been incarcerated. So
Wow.
I think what's changed is that the glorification of violence. I mean, it's everywhere. It is these kids, not, you know, we used to have, I watched somebody's story yesterday, and they were saying that they wanted to ban certain cartoons because they had violence. And it would reflect in the kids' behaviors. They would pick up these bad behaviors, and then somebody commented, we watched the Road Runner and we ain't never blow nobody up. But now they have all these people. I mean, guns is glorified. Carrying guns is glorified. It goes with a trap lifestyle. And that wasn't promoted when we were young. I have 6 kids and grandkids, and they're all in that era. And I have a son that's in federal, 2 sons that just came home, and a son that's in the federal system right now for guns, because it is so glorified. It is not only about them protecting themselves, it's about them glorifying the fact that how they protect themselves is through these guns, because every video somebody's talking about what kind of gun, how many people they shot, and they getting this street credibility. And we up against a battle, because when they come in our offices and we discuss this harm reduction standpoint, you know, how does that message shape now as opposed to how I delivered that message then? And the message has to go like, okay, well, how about you don't carry an AK? How about you just carry a Glock? I mean, it's this, or how about you don't carry when you go to these places, and you only carry when you have to go to these places, so that you reduce the amount of time and the types of weapons, because then you show them what's the time for this versus the time for that versus the time for that. And are you prepared to encounter that time for whatever this little issue is, or this issue? If it's not that your safety is threatened, are you prepared to give your life for glorification? And that's what and that's what I will say has changed for me working. You know, I work in HIV prevention, but my other is, you know, recidivated youth. So and when I say youth, they're up to 25. But that's what the conversation now is. And, you know, sometimes I just want to go in my office when they leave and cry, because why are we having these conversations?
So I know there's a lot of conversations, Tyler. I see your hand up. So I'm coming to you next, but I want to get to the next slide, because what I'm hearing, thank you, Anthony, is that we are in a loop, right? We just keep having the same conversation over and over and over and over and over until today, because really the truth is that we need to talk about really what's going on, right? So the children are wilding, that's a fact, right? I'm here, I'm so with you. But what is it that they are reacting to? What is it that they're responding to, right? And so I have condemned, quite frankly, some of my ancestors for not telling me some truth. You know what I'm saying? And so now I'm here to make good on my promise to my children. And so we are still defining the problem. So we just talked about a lot of the outcomes and the things that we're seeing, but we still are getting at the root. And so in defining the problem, we got to ask this question: what is structural violence? Is someone, Ashley, I see your mic is open. Can you read this for me and then say whatever comment you want to say?
Absolutely. structural violence, a form of oppression imposed by mutually reinforcing systems, including social, political, and economic, which prevent individuals and communities from having full access to resources and expression of their rights. And so, yeah, just, hearing Anthony talk about where it starts from, our schools in historically Black, brown, and low-income communities are, you have 40 kids to one teacher, the education system isn't there. There aren't really access to strong employment, so it all starts with a lack of resources, which I believe is true public safety when you supply a community with their needs. So yeah.
Excellent, Ashley. Okay, Tyler, I know you driving, so I didn't ask you to read the slides, but I know you have something you want to say.
Oh no, I'm not driving, I'm parked, but
okay.
I appreciate this platform and heard some informative points. I think Anthony's point right now resonates the most to me because of, you've just been hearing the conversation over and over and over again. I was in a group meeting with the group chat that we had, I was telling the guy, I'm from Missouri. I've been in New York almost 7 years now, and I'm from a little super small town, but it's the same culture, the violence, the same exact thing that I see here in Harlem, and wherever God blesses me to go, I go to Chicago, and I see the same thing in the Black communities. And when you go back to this thing talking about intentional, and this the deprivation and the psychological, when you want to get to the root of the problem, it's the system. It's designed to keep you down. It's designed to destroy us. It's just like people talk about these gangs. I'm not going to be a fool like what happens in Africa. Africa's continent is so rich in resources, but other countries go into Africa, they destabilize the country. They have these different countries fighting against each other, and they go in and rob them of their resources. I believe, now this is just my opinion, but also I believe it's a fact, that sometimes you may hear about some shootings going on in neighborhoods and you hear about retaliation. I believe that just like when they was having the protests, they had the outside agitators going in to do things, and they was like, oh, well, look at these Black Lives Matter people, they breaking the windows, they doing this. I believe the government sends in outside forces to come in to shoot up neighborhoods. They got people that would do that. And now these kids retaliate because, oh, my friend got shot, my friend got killed. So all this, the resources, because of the fact, if we had the resources, we can become independent. And that's one of the things that killed me more than anything. It's like I walk around Harlem because I live here. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I see police cars sitting in neighborhoods with the emergency lights on. They're not responding to an emergency, but is it like a psychological message that they send in? Like, it looks like a war zone. And like I said, these kids, like I said, like Anthony was saying, it's like the school. The school has a part to do with it. The community has a part to do with it. The home has a part to do with it. You go to the schools, the kids I work with, you're walking through metal detectors. It's like psychologically, we grooming you for prison. Yeah. Prison's on the stock market. So I just like, kids can call, I heard the other person that spoke after Anthony was saying like, she was a law enforcement and whatever, but she was saying that, man, back in the days, it didn't used to be like this. Me personally, I got my ass whipped and it helped me. But they say, I feel like ACS in a way, like I said, that as long as you're not killing your child and just like doing something super that's gonna destroy them, if your child is unruly, it's a good chance that if you can't discipline your child, then it's a good chance they're gonna be unruly. They're gonna end up in the system. And it's just, and like I said, just like Anthony and everyone else is saying, 40 and 50 years from now, we'll still be having the same conversation. But when it's intentional, when it's psychological, when it's social and political, this is the system meant to divide and conquer us. If we don't have that unity, we're going to be easy to control, and it's going to be this ongoing thing. And like they say, they glamorize everything in music and videos, like I said, the violence. I know I'm getting ready to cut it short. And like I said, everybody may think that I'm a bad person for getting ready to say this. But I was telling somebody the other day, I said, I wonder, does Cardi B talk to her daughter the way she talks in music? Does she groom her daughter to be able to suck a watermelon through a straw? And people like, man, why would you say something like that? I said, look how her music is influencing other young women out here in this world today. Look how many kids she's destroying. Look at Megan Thee Stallion. I like Taylor Swift. Them don't talk like that to sell music, but almost every Black artist, whether it's Lotto and this one and this one and this, is sexually explicit. The men, it's about the gang life. It's about violence. Like I said, Justin Bieber not talking like that. So thank you all for providing me this opportunity. And my God, oh my God.
Well, we're glad to have you. We're glad to have you, Tyler. And stay with us though. This conversation is going to be a little uncomfortable because it's just, who wants to keep talking about the same old thing, right? And so what I'm hearing, or what I heard in your share, Tyler, you talked about the system a lot. And in this definition of structural violence, we're talking about these systems are mutual reinforcing systems, right? So they're working together. So you mentioned ACS, right? Anthony mentioned the schools. Marcy mentioned law enforcement. Okay, someone talked earlier and said they work in a hospital as a hospital responder, right? So we all have an experience with these systems, have identified some aspect of the system that's not working on our behalf. And what we are drawing attention to right now in defining structural violence is identifying or just acknowledging that they work together, right, to impose these oppressive policies and or activities on usually Black and brown people, but it's really just poor people. Unfortunately, Black and brown people tend to fill up the lower rungs of the socioeconomic ladder. And so these systems are social, political, and economic, right? So we're going to talk about the economics and low socioeconomic status, but I do want to acknowledge, Tyler, what I heard in your share around somebody's benefiting. There's someone on the high end of the social economic ladder that's benefiting from all of this crap that's happening at the bottom, so-called. And these things are violent. Anything that prevents individuals from and communities from having access to everything that they need for the full expression of their rights, that's a form of violence, it's a form of structural violence. And that's what we are acknowledging in this definition. So it is an hour, more than an hour into our session, and I promised that I would give us a break. So if now is a good time, or if there's someone that really wants to say something, and we can collect that comment before we go on break. And so if there's someone that wants to chime in before we go to break.
I will just say so. Oh, you go, Carmen, you go.
Thanks. This is Carmen. I just wanted to say that I appreciate everything that's been said. And I was also thinking, like, living in my community, and I do understand the structural violence, the oppressive systems that are reinforcing this, but I'm also thinking about how can we change the mindset of our young people so that they're not killing each other. Like, it goes deeper. Like, there was examples of music, there was examples of like movies. I mean, the example of like harm reduction, like you can't tell a person they can't carry a gun, but like, can you carry a different gun, or can you don't carry a gun to a particular area? Or, I mean, I'm just like, so how can we change the mindset? I mean, yeah, we have to fight against these oppressive systems, you know, the
Mhm.
mass incarcerations. We have to, in our communities, Black and brown communities, poor communities that have metal detectors. And then we talk about other celebrities that they don't have this type of music, but like, I'm thinking that my concentration still is on how can I change the mindset? Like I have a grandson that's 9 years old and he listens to
Mhm.
this and I'm like, I constantly talk to him, but then when he leaves my house and goes back to his parents' house, there's like it's something all over again. So I don't know. I just
Yeah.
wanted to like it's the feelings that have been brought up in this conversation. It's like, what else can I do to
Mhm.
help the people in my community, to help each other, you know? But anyway, thank you.
So thank you, Carmen, for
Mm.
reflecting that. We'll hear from Charisma before we go to break. Carmen, in a quick and dirty answer, stay with the conversation that we're having today, right? Because your grandson might need to hear you tell him some truth that his parents aren't telling him. Okay. Okay, Charisma, let's hear from you and let's go to break.
Good morning, family. How are you?
All right. Great.
So I'm just going to play devil's advocate right now, if you guys don't mind. And I'm just going to piggyback off of Anthony and Tyler. So I have a master's in criminal justice. I studied criminal justice for 9 years, and I worked with this community for over 20 years. And like a comment was just made of how do we change their mind frame. And I'm telling you guys, it's absolutely a systematic issue, you know, and going through school, going through and learning about criminal justice, I'm just gonna put it out there. Like they teach officers who the criminal is before they graduate. They did it to me. Every book that we read, every assignment that we were giving was outlined with a philosopher or a theorist who basically said Black and brown people are the enemy. So when you do that and you put a stigma on our individuals, especially a community that is deprived of resources, I believe that you insinuate that that's what they are and they become that. They become that. You've already labeled them. They're in a mind frame. They don't have the resources. And at the end of the day, it's about them protecting themselves from the environment that they are forced to live within. So I just want to say that I know there's a lot of gang violence and there's a lot of other things going on, criminal mischief and guns and activities. But I'm telling you guys that if we really want to change the mind frame of these children, we have to show them that they are human beings and they have a purpose here. They have a purpose. If we don't show them that there's a purpose, they're going to keep doing what they're doing. Nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to change. When police officers go out to patrol a community, their objective is to look for criminals.
Yes.
If the kids are all bunched
because
up
that's
on
the
a corner
training.
together because they don't have anywhere
There's
else
their
to go,
training.
that's their training.
That's
and you
the
got to
training.
remember, the police officers, it's not their intention to go out and purposely look for Black and brown children, but those are the children that they find because the resources are not there. And even if the resources are there, they're there with a primitive, I would say, a primitive incitement where okay, if you come in here and you do this, we'll give you this, and it's never equivalent to what they actually need. So I always talk to my program director and I say to him, when we offer these children help, we have to define what help is, because it may not be the help they're looking for.
Thank you. Charisma, so you said at the beginning of your share, I'm going to play devil's advocate. And Nani, I saw your hand up. So I'm going to have to come to you after the break, as soon as we come after the break. Hopefully you'll still be here. But I didn't hear anything that you said that sounded different than what we were saying. As a matter of fact, thank you for reminding us that it is structural and it's systematic, because it's literally in the curriculum. It's literally in the training of the persons that are part of the thing, because the persons most times are just trying to feed their families. And now they're being trained to be part of an oppressive regime. Like, it's crazy. But we're here to unpack this and have the type of conversation that helps us find our power in the situation. And so, Anthony, I see you. I know you want to say something. You want to
Real
respond,
quick.
but we have.
Okay. Well, me and my sister, my baby sister's a police officer. We came out of the same household. When she became a cop, she hated me. I don't know what happened.
Wow.
She was taught to just hate her own kind. It was a system.
Ooh,
Granted, I chose to go a different route, but she started to hate her older brother, and we stopped talking. She's, because she became a police officer. All right, I'm done.
Thank you, though. That was important. Is important. Okay, so literally a bio break, right? So those of us that are enjoying this conversation, but maybe need to go get some water or go run to the bathroom. And so I'm looking at the time. It's 11:13 in New York. So let's just do 4 minutes break, and we'll be right back. Yeah. Okay. Play some music.
Miss Gasper?
Yes, I'm here.
I was having technical difficulties. It took me like 20 minutes to get on.
No.
I went to like 2 computers, so I just wanted to make sure that I was checked as present. Eva Santiago, Bronx Connect.
Oh, Eva from the Bronx. Thank you for being with us. Yes, we got you.
Thank you.
Fully here.
I appreciate it.
Got you. So by now you probably get that I'm hip hop head from a particular. I will be playing some more hip hop during this session. That is part of my healing and resiliency. So conversation is doing good, right? No good. No way. So we're good at talking about these things. And we're actually good at being in action around these things. I think the key is to come together more, right? To be more in the space of this and coordinating our efforts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this has been a great conversation. I got a slide here for us to break down. We're going to get a chance to get into a breakout room and talk more in depth about the things that we are concerned about and what it is that we came to get today. So, like I said, this slide is loaded. There's a lot of stuff here. And so we're still defining this issue, right? So we started with defining violence for ourselves. We started to open that up. To, we know about interpersonal violence and things between people. Then we started opening this up a little bit more into a more broader exploration and definition of what we might be experiencing. We just had a great conversation about structural violence and how we are experiencing it and how it shows up. And so we're going to continue that conversation and start to categorize these things. And this is just, remember, we're identifying root causes, we're defining the problem. And so there are, on the left side of the screen, you see a list of 5 different types of violence, right? So we said structural violence. Someone said it's like a war zone. I think that was Tyler. Yes, it is. We're literally there's a war happening right now on the planet. Ideology-motivated violence is pretty much what we have been living with, right? We talked about mindset and how we even got to this mindset in the first place. Most of this violence that we have been discussing or talking about happens in community, right? And that's where some of us are working actively to prevent or mitigate the impacts of that. And then there's family and intimate partner violence, which we have talked about, right? What does it look like when the violence is in your house and in the neighborhood and at the school? That's a lot. So that is the health impacts of that we're going to talk about in our session on Monday. That's a discussion on epigenetics, and we're going to have that discussion on Monday. Right now, we're going to split up into some breakout rooms so that we can begin to identify these types of different expressions of this behavior in these 4 categories. So the 4 categories we have here are self-directed, and then interpersonal, and then structural, and then cultural. And so that is what you might see, if you can see this slide in the screen. On the right, with the pretty iceberg, is all pretty in blue. Now, there's something that's very striking to me about this image. But I want to give you a moment to be struck by it, maybe, and comment on it. And so when you look at the iceberg imagery of the iceberg, and you notice, what we're saying about this, where the self-directed and interpersonal violence is in relationship to the structural and cultural violence, what might you infer? What is it that you think? What comes to mind when you see this image?
So hi, it's Carmen.
Hey, Carmen, hold on, Carmen.
Okay.
So got some people that got their hands up, and I want to get some other voices in the space. And so Freedom, I haven't heard you. Let's hear from you. Throw that hand up. Oh, pardon me. That's Ashley. You got a long ass name. I thought it was Ashley and then Freedom.
I wanted
Go
to
ahead,
be sure.
Ashley.
I was like, I'm not sure if there's a
That's
person
you.
named Freedom on this chat.
Freedom Agenda. I got you. Go ahead.
So what I see when I think about this is like, the tip of the iceberg, self-directed and interpersonal violence. When I think about this is I think about how the media portrays violence and what they hyper focus on, and what we like right now you have Mayor Adams trying to push this, mass crime bill, crime is going up, but not really looking at the structural and cultural violence that's actually happening in the communities and what the root of violence is. And I hate to sound like a broken record, but the root of violence often is lack of resources and lack of stability in communities. So that's what I think structural and cultural violence pertains to. And it's underneath the surface because no one talks about it. And we rather blame a community than instead of looking at the problem of what exists and is being structurally and culturally done in these communities. And sorry, that was a bit of a tangent.
No, that's right in the vein of what we're talking about. Thank you for that, Ashley. Okay, Carmen, what did you have a reflection on this image?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was trying to unmute myself.
Gotcha.
No, that was a very good point. The last speaker, I'm sorry, I forgot your name that fast. But when I first looked at this, like the self-directed interpersonal violence, but underneath that all, it's the structural violence and the cultural violence that's really like pushing that. So I do appreciate the conversation because it also is allowing me to think about, everything else that's been said. So thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, and so there are examples of each one of these types. We can warm up by giving an example of each, and then you're going to get into your breakout room. You're going to take some time with your group to make a list for your particular area. So again, structural, cultural, interpersonal, and self-directed. So we have heard some examples of structural violence. I'll put it together. So when Tyler mentioned ACS, right? ACS sometimes get called by the school, right? And then when ACS comes to the house, they bring law enforcement with them. That's 3 agencies right there, mutually imposing problems on people and families. So that's an example of structural. So cultural violence, we might have, when we talk about the glorification of violence, that is a form of cultural violence because it's being expressed widely in culture, in a culture. I don't say it's Black culture. I say it's some bastardization of culture in America. Then there's self-directed violence, which an example of that could be excessive alcohol consumption. Or a risky behavior, like this, when you get in that group, you can kind of list that as you understand it. And then interpersonal are the things that we see pretty much all the time, the beef between people, the violence between people and or groups of people, okay? And so I agree with what I heard Carmen and Ashley say, like the things that you see is the self-directed and interpersonal, and it's the smallest part of our issue. The largest part of our issue is the structural and cultural violence, and you don't see it, right? Which is probably why we're always asking for the research, right? Because we're just like, well, how do you see it? But we know it exists. And so create a list. Everyone's going to end up in a breakout room. And then the title for your breakout room will be at somewhere on the bottom of the top of the screen. I'm not sure. Create a list of maybe 5 to 7 examples of that type of violence. And then we'll share that back out when we come back to the main room. Any questions? Or what questions do you have, rather?
So just to be clear, 5 to 7 examples of the structural and cultural violence, or all of it together, self-directed and interpersonal violence and structural, or?
So 5 to 7 examples of the one category that your group is going to be working on.
Okay, good.
Okay. So yeah, so you don't have to do everything because the other groups each group will be taking on a category.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarity, getting that clarity, Carmen. Okay, so The rooms are open. I think I set them for 5 minutes. I did. Okay, good. So you get into that room. We'll see you on the other side.
Reality. Why motivated?
Hello? Hello? Amitra. Almitra. Oh, I'm talking out loud.
Well, welcome back, or welcome back, or welcome back.
Articulation of speech in a public setting to be able to say, hey, so and so and so. So programs that you cut funding for, like mock interviews and all that stuff, like that should be a mandatory part of aiming in that sense.
Welcome back, welcome back. All right, so everyone's coming back in slowly but surely. We'd love to hear how that conversation went.
Sneakers is not going to be allowed at the show.
We got all these. This
and a young lady
is a
has
deep
to
discussion.
dress a certain way, like you gotta get to that level. You can't just be-
Okay, so Giovanni, is that that's you? That's not here? That's your mic I'm hearing? Got some noise going on in the back. But if you want to speak, I would love to hear from you also. And I got that. So iPhone user with your hand up, would love to call on you with your name. And it says iPhone. Okay, so I think just about all of us are back. Some persons had to step away, so they might be still lingering in the breakout room. Okay, iPhone, say, who are you?
Hi, I was trying to change my name on the Zoom, but for some reason on my iPhone, it wasn't allowing me to. My name is Damaris Negron. I'm a hospital responder for Saving Goso in East Harlem.
Hey, Damaris.
Hi, guys. So our group did interpersonal. Some of the examples that we came up with is youth violence, bullying, family, relationship, sexual assault, workplace, meaning that an employee, for example, let's say that the boss is giving you so much work, or you want a raise and they have certain favoritism on certain people and they're not like respecting you or taking advantage of you. And then we just talk about assault. Out of all of them, bullying, I know a lot. Throughout my whole life, I was bullying and teased, and that was the cause of my anger and everything, because I was I had health issues, so I was smaller than most of the students. So there were kids that were bigger than me that would pick on me and all that stuff. So that would be an example of interpersonal that causes people anger, which causes violence.
Right. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Damaris. Bullying. I am anti-bullying. I'm not about that life. I don't think it's funny to make fun of people, to tease people. And it is violence. Because if my reaction and my body is that I want to hurt you, then what you were doing over there is violent. You have crossed the line. So I have a little thing about bullying. So thank you for raising that. Okay, so that is the group that worked on interpersonal violence. Let's hear from the group that worked on self-directed violence. Where's that group? Someone can speak up for that group and just share the list of items that you came up with? Anybody? Who was in the self-directed violence group? Somebody got to talk.
Who was in the group?
I don't know. Well, I could know, but I'm trying to just do the honor system and get the people here that I don't want to be teacher. So who got it?
We talked about some everything.
So interpersonal violence. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that group might not recognize self-directed violence might not recognize that was their group.
We didn't get to I don't think we got to see the topics, and we were just talking about numerous things, so that contributed to violence. So sorry about that. So that could have been our group. I don't know.
No problem. That might be everyone, but interpersonal. Let's see. We will have to see. Cultural violence. Where's that group? Is there a group, a person that can represent for that group and say what you discussed? Cultural violence. Go ahead, Eva.
Yeah, we only got a couple of things. We didn't get 5 to 7 because we really wanted structural violence. But we did talk about like the mentality, right? Like we talked about culturally how, and a lot of us had this commonality between us was if we got into a fight and we didn't like bust somebody's butt, right? When we got home, we got it there too, right? So that was like the cultural violence that we dealt with regarding our parents stating that like, okay, you better make sure that if this person attacks you, that you take care of it. Because if you don't take care of it, you're gonna get it at home. So we talked about domestic violence. So we talked about like that whole mentality of like, you know, machismo, you know, the man is the head of the household. The man has the last say, right? Depending on, you know, a lot of our cultures, that was another thing that we talked about. We talked about discipline. I was also thinking about like what happens in the house stays in the house.
Yep.
So if there was any type of discipline that was going on, whether it was discipline that, you know, was really discipline and not abuse, but if there was abuse going on, which a lot of our families, ourselves in our own families have gone through this, where it could have been abuse, right? But our families didn't see that. They just saw this as discipline, and this is something that stays in the house, and it's unspoken, in, you know, to the public.
And very, very cultural, right? It's very much, this is how my parents did it, right? That's when you hear that, it's like, oh, hell no, we're dealing with something that's intergenerational. Okay, great. Thank you for that, Eva. And let's hear from the very coveted topic of structural violence, right? Everyone wants to talk about that. So where's that group, and who is going to speak on behalf of that group?
I'll talk a little bit just because I'm going to hop off soon. Hey, Amika.
Hey, Tiffany.
When talking about structural violence, we was talking about the different systems that take part in structural violence, ranging from ACS to the police, to the Department of Education, a number of structures that have been put in place, and some of the ways that they contribute. And we said, as far as the education department, you know, the lack of education for our young people, quality education, the dilapidated brick and mortars, the lack of training for some of the teachers, the prejudices and biases that some of the teachers have, the stigma placed on our young people, having, and it shouldn't be an issue, but it is, having teachers coming from other jurisdictions to work in communities with Black and Brown that, one, they don't understand, two, they barely even like. So we talked about all of that. ACS, going into these homes and taking away the children and, you know, not being properly trained, not putting the parenting into parenting classes, or not being able to flag when a child is in trouble, right? That's a big issue. And then they end up murdered or badly hurt. We talked about that. And then we already talked about police, the over-policing, the prejudices, the disrespect, the not being relatable to the communities that they work in. So it was a number of different things that we spoke about.
Pardon me. Go ahead, Tyler. You want to add on? That was excellent, Tiffany. Thank you.
Yeah. She made some very, very great points. Since you said the structural, then it comes to my part, which I always ask people: why do we have to sit around and wait for other people to do what we're capable of doing for ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
I know when I was growing up, and it was so much better, even though I come from the late era where they just start, they had already started integrating schools. But I heard the stories about when they had the school, when they were separated, they got more knowledge about, because I even think you made the comment about the generations before you not passing that information on to you.
Mm-hmm.
So but once I don't know why, but we begged and protested and marched. They're like, hey, let us go to your schools. But they control the curriculum of what they want you to know. And like Carter G. Woodson said, once you can control a man's thinking, you don't have to worry about his actions. He said, Black people have been so used to going through the back door. If there's not one, then they'll make one. And my thing is like, we are always sitting around waiting for somebody to do for us. We have to demand better for ourselves if we want it to be better. And like where I'm from, they don't call it ACS, they call it DCFS. My grandmother put the fear of God in us. She told us, if you call DCFS on me, call a funeral home first, because that's where you're going. I was like, man, I was scared to look at the phone. But I thought she was the meanest person in the world. But as I got older, I lost my mom at a young age. God put me in the best possible hands, because she taught me so much, and it's about how to maneuver in the world. And that's on us to give these kids the tools and the resources and show them how the tools work in order for them. They the future. And like James Baldwin said, for they are all of our children, we will profit by or pay for what they become. If we invest in them right now, then we're going to benefit from them. But if we show them that we don't care about them, then they're not going to care about us when we get older.
That's right.
So that's what I'm saying. Stop waiting on this Caucasian to help us. And something else too, like you said, this is a public health issue. And this is a perfect example, like you said, systematic. There are no Caucasians. I told my group, why isn't there any Caucasians speaking up right now? Because right now it's just us speaking. Why come they not at the table? If this is a public health issue, where are their voices? Where are the Asian voices? So thank you. God bless you all.
I'm going to try, just want to add to Tyler before I jump off, and I made a valid point in my group of saying, we also have to remember that we need to include the parents, because the parents aren't like they were back in the days. They don't become parents at 30s and 40s. They're becoming parents at 14 and 15. So when you talk about helping and assisting and coaching and advising and influencing and mentoring the youth, you have to include the parent in that, because the parent ain't that far off from the young person. And they are becoming grandparents before they even hit the level of maturity. So we need to include the entire family. We need to school the entire family and mentor and advise.
Excellent.
Can I say something?
So yes, of course you can say something. I'm going to move us into where this conversation is going. I'm just going to put up another slide, because we are now into a conversation about, okay, so what are we going to do, and what are we really dealing with here? So go ahead, Elsie.
So recently I went to a conference, and it's a bunch of church goers that love the Lord, but we want to do something. So what we've been doing is we're starting literacies in NYCHA projects, right? We're doing literacy, we're doing mentoring. We're trying to get into the communities that are really needing support, right? Because we're going to have to do something after hours. This is going to be not just one person or just one system. It's going to be us. It's going to have to be us. We have to start going out of our comfort zones and our apartments and going to speak to somebody who may need our assistance. Our community is turning to just staying within the walls of their apartments. And I understand the reason, because sometimes people, they get in trouble, but we got to stop that fear. We have to go in and try to help out. And even if it's just a literacy class for kids, after school,
that's huge.
Some tutoring, some mentoring, some basketball. I mean, whatever it takes, we got to go out and do something about it, because it's not going to take one person. It's going to take all of us.
It is really an all hands on deck situation, Elsie, and thank you for doing that. And you and your comrades, right? Because it's after hours, right? That's how the Garvey movement was, created, right? And so that's just what it takes. It takes for us to stop waiting around, like Tyler said. And what I am putting forward is that this information here is not just about, hey, babe, you need to think differently. It's about, hey, let me tell you something about socioeconomic status, right? Let me tell you something about impoverishment of communities, right? Poverty is not a natural state. Communities have been impoverished, right? There's an entire system at play. I know you're only 9 years old and you didn't ask to come into this world. This is the world I brought you to, or my child brought you to in case of grandparents. And this is what we are living with, right? And so in this country, we live in a so-called democratic capitalist economy, but really, this is how it looks. This is the situation that we are in. And this is what you need to know so that you can help us join in the fight against getting out of here. So our children are our co-conspirators in this situation, right? And so we have to train them properly. And so this is why we're talking about it right now, because we might not know everything, right? We need to talk to each other so that we can train them properly, because if we don't, they're going to come for us later, right? And so this is my understanding of this topic. And so there's a whole bunch of policy situations. These are social determinants of health and well-being and safety, right? There's housing and civil rights policies and education problems. We're still teaching Christopher Columbus discovered in America. That is violent. That is violent, right? Criminal justice. So we heard from the sisters say, well, you know what they training us? They training us in targeting people. And they're saying that these people are the problem and that's it. Not the regime, not the politics, not none of the history. These people are the problem, right? And that just creates more, that thinking is pervasive and it creates more of an issue. So we have to even teach our children to not just be thinking and focusing on the small thing. Always look for the bigger picture. Always look for the context. Always look for the frame of what's happening. There's environmental racism that's at play, right? So someone talked about tall buildings, I think. The environmental racism that's going on in this country is retarded, right? The fact that Black and brown people live where there is the most pollution, and that is consistent. The most water contamination, that is consistent across the country. That's not just in one area. That's how the whole country is designed. And so there is a lack of cultural community cohesion. There is a total breakdown and loss of some very important things. That's how I was talking about, I ended up with my grandmom's. It's the best thing that I could have got. So those of us that had that, we got to give that back. If it skipped a generation or for some reason the children around us don't seem like they got it, but we have it, we got to do exactly what Elsie's doing. Get with our folks that care and start giving your time to this issue. And most of us that are in this session at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Friday are those people, right? So I want to commend you and acknowledge you, right? Because you come to this conversation for insight and support and inspiration and reprieve or whatever it is that you came to get. And so when we're talking to our young people and each other, we're talking about the issue of violence. Well, violence itself is a social determinant of health, right? And so how does violence impact all of these determinants? So if violence is present in the household or in the community, then we're not learning. Our children are not learning the way that they're supposed to, right? What they are supposed to be getting in school, which is problem, the curriculum is a problem, but they can't even get it. Whatever it is that they're supposed to get, the math is still usually good. The history is not so good. But they're having a hard time learning, right? The violence has an impact on community resources. Businesses don't want to open in neighborhoods that are plagued, so-called, with violence. And then we know that violence just creates more violence. And it makes people go inside and not come outside. So there's no more community cohesion. So there's all kinds of ways that we can talk about the issue that raises more insight and more issues. Like we're supposed to be having different conversations. And so these two slides, social determinants of health, and then violence as a social determinant of health, I'm hoping that there's some more information here that might not have been talked about, might not have been considered, or that now we are understanding that we need to have the conversation deeper and broader. Right? It can't just be a conversation about the children are glorifying violence and they're losing their minds. Because then who is to blame for that? Like, what is the root cause of that? If the children are reflecting something, then who are we looking at? Is it us? Is it them? Who is them? What are we really saying? And what are we going to do? Okay, and so those information, I think information is key. I think that if we're not having the right conversations or we're holding back when we talk to our youth because we think that they don't need to learn about this, I disagree. I vehemently disagree, actually. I think that as soon as your children are old enough to see and understand and experience things, so what is that, like 3, 4, 5, that now is the time to start getting them the awareness that they need to have in some instances for their shared survival. Okay, I know I'm doing a lot of talking, and we are going to end soon. Let's hear from Rob, because I haven't heard from him since the beginning. And then we're going to shift the conversation. Go ahead, Rob.
Nah, that's cool. Everything you were saying, I wish you would have kept going. But nah, honestly, I agree with everything you were saying, along with Elsie, Carmen, Tyler. I wrote names down and everything like that because to piggyback on your point with, the kids reaching a certain age and, implementing certain things so that they know, we're guiding them in the direction. We don't want to take credit for what they're doing, but we're just guiding them in the direction. So what happens is, we have to also, get with the families as well too, because it's impossible to help them learn if they're struggling to survive. So what happens is when you're struggling to survive, you could give them any book, any pen and paper, and like they might know exactly what they need to do, but that hunger pain is still in their stomach. And if they hungry, their families is hungry. So that now develops a romance of ignorance. And then you go outside, and then one of the biggest factors that we face nowadays that none of us faced growing up is social media, the powerhouse of social media. So what happens is, we don't have a trust the process no more. We want it now process. So like they don't see the work that people put in to do things, whether it's ignorance, positive things, anything like that. They just see the result. They don't see what goes into it and stuff like that too. So I think with what Elsie said, as far as come together as a village, as a community, and being able to be a helping hand and helping those that's seeking to pull them up and things like that or whatever. I think my motivation in even doing this work outside of coming from where I come from is just to be the person that I needed when I was younger, because we can't go back in time, because we all would. So I think a kid that's half my age is like my reflection, and being able to pour into him based on the experience I had when I was in his shoes is to make him a better person. And then to what Carmen was saying with her 9-year-old grandchild, I would say just continue to be consistent, because it's always going to be an outside force or influence. But if your grandchild know that you're consistent in your beliefs and what you're teaching and preaching to them, then they're going to know what's right and what's wrong. So just being consistent, because one of the things that these not one of the things, but these kids are slipping through the cracks because they're so used to inconsistent behaviors on our end, because a lot of us throw our hands up after we realize we can't get to them after a certain point. So we still got to be consistent in our approach as well too.
Oh, excellent, Rob. You're taking me right where I want to go, right? Because when we throw our hands up, it's because we are living inside the same thing that we're fighting against, okay? And so let me say that again. We are living inside of the same thing that we are fighting against. So when we're working with young people and they're getting frustrated, and we really, our heart is in it, we really want to save their life, right? Save our own lives. And then sometimes it gets to be too much. But we know better, right? We got to know better, and we got to do better. And so taking care of ourselves is, so what Audre Lorde said, it is an act of rebellion, right? It is an act of, it is a political act. So that time that you take for yourself to meditate, to work out, to play sports, to, all right, help me. What do we do? What is it that we do? We go to church, we pray. I'm praying all the time, praying as soon as I get off this call, right? And so what are we out here doing for ourselves to make sure that we can stay in the fight and stay in the conversation? So that is how we're going to end our session today because we're coming up on time. Some people have their hands up. What I want to hear from you is what you're committed to doing this weekend to take care of yourself. Because we just went through a lot of conversation early on a Friday, right? In preparation for a conversation that we're going to have again on Monday. I'm going to email a whole bunch of things out, or have someone email a whole bunch of things out to you all so that you can prepare over the weekend for Monday session if you like. You don't have to. What I would like, though, my request would be that you do something to take care of yourself. Okay, I'm gonna play a music video at the end so you could do that right now. You could dance right now if you want. I see Eva, you got your hand up. Rob, you still have your hand up. What are you committed to doing this weekend? That is an act of self-care.
I just wanted to make one point because we talked about parents.
Hold on, Eva. Eva, I hear you, but I really need you to tell me what you're going to do to take care of yourself first, and then I'll hear your comment.
I'm going to a Yankee game. I'm going to a Yankee game.
Really good. See,
with my parents, that I have a parent support group, and we're going to a Yankee game.
That's really good. Okay, go ahead. What's your point? I'm playing the music.
My point was
Tyler is anti-Yankees.
Because Tyler, and Tyler, I was just gonna give you big ups too. Look at that. Tyler, I liked what Tyler said about, ACS. I used to advocate for families in family court who were affected by ACS, right? And so back in the day, we would depend on our community to raise our children, right? And so one thing that I wanted to say was know your rights, right? Because 76% of the removal of children is for neglect, not abuse. That's inadequate housing, inadequate childcare, inadequate food. Know your rights so that you're better prepared in protecting your families. And so I always let my parents know these are your rights. Make sure that you don't, especially if you need resources, right? You can always get the resources that you need, but if you know your rights, then you have a better chance of your children not being removed for neglect.
Excellent. Thank you. Super important. Can I hear one other person say what it is that they're going to do this weekend to take care of themselves? Just one person, and I promise you, I'm gonna play this KRS-One video, and then we're done. And it's 12 o'clock. Was the time of the training we've reached it. So if it's time for you to go, I understand that. Go ahead, Anthony.
I'm gonna sleep this weekend and catch up on some sleep. I might sleep 10 hours tomorrow.
Yes.
Gotta catch up on some sleep.
Excellent. Okay, so with that, thank you all for your presence, your energy, your time, right, and your brilliance in this conversation that might feel a little bit like a repeat. I know, right? So I really appreciate you coming to it and bringing that up. I hope that everyone that's here can be with us again on Monday. These sessions are recorded, and so if you aren't able to be here on Monday, you will have access to that session so you can get the full experience of this condensed version of attempting to workshop this topic. I am an 80s, not an 80s baby. I'm a 70s baby. So I am going to play KRS-One, who just released another album. 50-year-old MC come through, right? And you talk about dancing old school dances, and so you don't have to leave your camera on if you don't want to be embarrassed, but feel free to dance and let's let this conversation go. Everyone really have a good Friday and a good weekend. Take care of yourself, take care of your families, take care of each other. That's what's going to get us through all this mess is love. That's a fact. And maybe some dance and some fun.
Can you dance? Let's find out. I want to see everybody on the dance floor right now. I'm about to put y'all to the test. Let's go. Do you know the dances? sure, taking no chances. Bringing back them old school dances, here's the answers. Whether you remember or you're new to this endeavor, dance is a major part of this culture forever. What are we preserving if the children ain't learning? Culture ain't about just numbering and just wording. Sometimes you gotta show the culture at the party. Let's start with the Bismarck dance. Come on, everybody. The Bismarck, the party bout to get sparked. This is that moment you get live, get courage, get hard. I spit art, I'm one of a kind, they not me. I'm digitally underground like Shock G. Speaking of Shock G, when I jump, we jump. That's crisscross, but we talking about Humpty Hump. When you up, what? This is your chance. Come on everybody, do the Humpty dance. Let's go. Was the Humpty, now let's get it chunky. Like Biz used to say, yo, let's get funky, funky. With the funk flow, we don't stop. Right about now, we gonna take it to the WAP. Remember the WAP? Feet slide, shoulder drop. We did it in the Cubs, we even did it on the block. Ready, set, go. Stand on your spot. Take it to the top. Come on, y'all, let's do the WAP. Non-stopping, hip-hopping, we dropping. We ain't even get yet to popping or locking. It's shocking how many dance moves we came with. Obviously, we and the ancestors got the same gift, the same lift, the same riff, and the same split. Like Bob Marley said, when the music hits, it's painless. You can't tame this or hate this. You gotta love me. Come on, y'all, let me see you do the Dougie. Woo! That's right. That's right. This that part where we go freestyle. Some of y'all doing the Cabbage Patch, some of y'all doing the Running Man. Let me see what you got. Come on. Freestyle, freestyle. Come on, y'all. Yeah. Where my B-boys at? Where my B-girls at? Okay, we out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for the dance party at the end.
Oh my gosh.
Appreciate y'all.
All right.
Excellent. Okay, see you Monday. Excellent job.
Hey, Tyler.
Peace.
Take care. God bless.
God bless.
Peace.
Power to the people.
Power. Always power where the people is. Come on, Mitra. Ow! Ow! Boom, 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 boom. Yes. Because we got to do something. We just can't be out here. Woo! I ain't going in there today. I be forgetting. These days it'd be hard. I'm like, I'm working. You're at work. You're on the clock. as you can see. What is that shirt?